And then when they meet with these obstacles in life, then I try to tell them, this is the same thing my dad used to tell me, was never take a back seat to anybody. Always be proud of your heritage and who you are. Speak up for yourself, because nobody will do it for you. And this is the same thing I have told my kids over and over again. If you get knocked down, get back up and defend who you are. If you are labeled as something, say that I am an American. That's the only thing that will, kind of help your life out as well. We walked down through streets, never had any trouble, but these past years we've had friends or someone that I know that will say, you know what the kids said to me on the street, or we went to a cafe and they didn't serve us. They told us we don't serve to Indians. I've gone to the same cafes as they have, and I have never had this trouble. Or once or twice some wise kid will come along. But then we tell them, well, you believe the way you do. If you say you understand Indians, then you got to think and do things just like us. Many people have come to us and said, well, what's it like living off the reservation? And I tell them, how would you feel if you went over to England and lived? I said, that's the same experience we Indians have living among you white people. And I said, you eat the food you eat. A lot of people say, what do you eat? Come to my home, I say. Eat dinner with us and see if we eat anything else different. And my aunt sends some frozen blueberries out with us. And we had some little kids that come around and play with our kids. And they eat it by the handfuls and out of a bowl. And the little white kids want to eat some. For you know it, that's all that's eating them. It's all eaten by the little white kids because they don't know what it is. And we tell them, they ask us where we were growing it. I say, on my reservation where I lived. And they want to know my mommy or my daddy and my sisters all live in teepees. And I ask them, what makes you say that? Well, I watched it on television. And I tell them, well, if that's the way they are, then I guess you speak funny too, don't you? What language you speak? And then they just start laughing, and they come into our homes. I think we got most of the neighborhood kids hanging around our place all the time. But I remember an incident one time that was really funny. We used to live in Bingham. See, my husband works up at the copper mine in Bingham Canyon. He's a machineman there. He works on these big machines that dig out the ore from the dirt there. And they use powder, and blasting powder rather. And then they use these shovels, so that's what he works on. He's been there for 19 years now. He left his reservation at the age of 14. His mother died when he was 6 years old, and his father he never knew. His grandmother raised him. At the time of his mother's death, he was going to a day school in Coronado, Arizona, and then his grandmother thought that it was very foolish of him to go to school, so she took him out of there. He claims he had to ride a mail truck in order to get down to Coronado about 5 o'clock in the morning and get home about 5. His mother, when he was alive, would stand at the road and wait for him in the evening with an apple or an orange for him, trying to reward him for going to school because that was what she wanted. But after she died, then his grandmother just raised him and took him out. But he'd always heard of the outside world and how much money the boys make because they were going out. So his brother told him to come to Gallup, and they'd catch a train to some place and work on the railroad. And this sounded real good to him, so he went out to work. He has never had no education at all. But he's trying to go back to school at this adult program that the Community Action Program has put out in Granger area, and that's where he's going. He feels very lucky to have this chance of trying to learn something. He's a wonderful worker, and he really puts all his effort out because he knows what a struggle it is. And he knows what it means to be without money and to live on a reservation. He's always claimed that he's an adopted youth now because he thinks he'll never be able to go back to his reservation, that life is so hard there. But the only thing that the problems that they have, I've heard it from a lot of them young guys that go out or come out of school from the different Indian schools. Their problems is that they cannot cope with the white people, that it's just, they're labeled, just like if they're wearing a label across their back, their fronts, but they're labeled, they're Indians and no good workers and they can't do anything right. They always say an only good Indian is a dead Indian, and that isn't the way it is. If you put your effort out and do the best you can and show them you can do it, then that's the way you'll get your reputation as. It's hard, but once they get that respect for you, then anybody's willing to stick up for you then. A lot of kids have come up to my kids with their long hair and they yank on their hair. They think they're wearing this wigs and stuff. Just because we live in a city, they don't think it's possible for them to have long hair. Even elderly men will come up and stroke their hair and say, "Is this real?" And we say, "Yes, it's real." They don't believe us, and then they yank on it a little bit too hard, and the kid starts crying. Then that takes them by surprise. "Oh, I thought all the Indians cut off their hair," they say. "Well, this Indian didn't." And that's the way it's been. You have to find yourself out in this world, and it's not easy, and it isn't hard either. But then you just have to make up your mind, and once you get there, then you've got it made. But we're all labeled alike. It don't matter what tribe we are. We wear the same label. And the young kids, my kids have had to live with it. I've told them their main problems are with Mexicans more than it is with white. Because the Mexicans are just like the white people. They don't know. Maybe they're a little bit worse. But this has been my children's problems in these schools. White kids, they know them, they grew up with them, and they're kind of understanding. They come around to the house. But the Mexican kids, and they seem to be a little bit harder to get to know. But I think if these kids were out here, I'm sure they'd have the same problems when they go out into a city. They don't know how to, they don't know what to say, or some people act like they never seen you. They walk right past you, bump into you. You say you're sorry, and then they turn around. Some other white person that's behind you sees what you're trying to do and turns around and say, "Now that is a true American." And boy, my heart just swells when I hear someone say that. They say, "Well, just let them be." That's just many of the people that treat Indians the way like that. And then it makes me feel good to think, well, I didn't start an argument on the street or start shoving back. So I just take it what they do, but somebody else notices it and then compliments us on this.
Gertrude, a lot of people put your dad down as one of the most famous of the Ute people in our later days, and one of the great leaders. Can you think of anything that your dad ever told you that really spurred you on or helped you to go ahead in this world?
Well, he's always told us, never be ashamed of who you are, and you're never too proud to stoop over and help the person that's in need. You might be better off than most people, but don't forget who you are and where you come from. Stoop over and work for that person, Or if you see a fellow friend in need, go to them, help them. Even if they don't reward you, it'll make you that much happier knowing that you've helped somebody else. And this is what I've always done. I've tried to be the same way because I know it hurts when somebody else will say, oh, you never do anything what your dad used to do. I looked through his papers after his death. I was really surprised to see the things that the groceries and stuff that he had bought for other families. And yet, he had to pay for it. And I always think this is why, I guess that's the way he felt.
Gertrude, how do you see the Indian people and the white people? How do you see them? Are their ways different? Do you think the Indian people thinks different than the white people?
Well, I think, like I say, you're brought up by old people and you're around these oldsters like our grandparents, and they tell us, do this, do that. And then you live like that, and it's pretty hard to forget when you've been brought up these old ways. Then you go out among the white people and things are done differently. I remember being told to get out of bed before the sun come up. And you do that. It's just a habit you have. You go to bed early and try to get up early. And then when you get out in the white world, then, nobody comes alive until after 8 o'clock. And our neighborhood will be still sleeping, and there we are trying to mow the lawn, and they tell us, turn that thing off, it's waking us up. So we have to wait until about 10 o'clock to mow our lawn. And that's when everybody comes alive. But it really is hard. But, you never forget some of these things that the old people tell you. You just can't forget it. Then you try to pass it on to your kids. And then the little white kids, they hang around. Why do you do that, Mrs. Willie? And I say, well, I just don't think that they should be doing this or that. But it's challenging both ways. You come back and you try to be an Indian and find yourself you can't speak very good, and by the time you get the hang of it and go back to city life, you can't speak English very good either. So when anybody asks me, then they always, like this one Navajo kid says, when he went into Air Force, they asked him, on the paper, on the questionnaire, it says, do you speak a foreign language? And he says, do you know they don't even know that we speak foreign language? And that's English.
Isn't that about the truth?
The only thing that I can really strongly remember that he hashed over and over with us kids was, someday you're going to lose your identity as Indians. You're going to forget your language. You're going to forget your culture, your tradition, and all of that. And that's just where you're going right now by not teaching your kids how to speak Ute, he'd tell us. And he told us, be sure and teach the kids, your kids, my grandchildren. He says, teach them to speak Ute and don't let them ever forget how we're supposed to live, who we are, where we come from. It was really a big thing. We don't look at it like that, but when President Lincoln set the slaves free, he set the red man free too, he says. And he said, someday it's going to be asked, who is the Indian? Who's an Indian now? Who's got the right heritage to claim this land? And you know what we're going to do? We're going to say, I am. And that person's going to say, okay, prove to me you're an Indian. And what are we going to say? You guys going to stand up and you're going to speak in English, well, I'm so-and-so's daughter. My grandparents was this. And he'll say, no, that isn't what I'm looking for. And someday it's got to be somebody that'll say, no, Nooch. And that's the one that man's gonna say, right, you're the Indian. The only Indian that's left, the only Indian that's gonna get all this reward or whatever's gonna be at the end of that time.
Gertrude, do you teach your children Indian, since you're Indian, especially since their father is Navajo? Have they learned the Navajo language too, or are they still speaking Ute?
Well, we both try. I'm not very good. I realize I should have started long ago, but they can understand pretty good, but not where they can speak it yet. They try, but they think it's just like I was. I was kind of ashamed to speak out at one time of my own language. And their dad, he can't read and write. We have Navajo books and stuff that the kids could read, but we can't pronounce it good. But we're trying with them to speak the Navajo language too. And we hope that we can accomplish this with him, because more and more I realize just what he meant by that. It's got a different meaning to me now that I've been out in the white people's world. Nia. Lula Brock.
Tell your mother's name. Who was your mother?
Maggie and Karugat.
Who was your father?
Charlie was.
What's that?
He got to know to say me. What to be watch. The was out suddenly, Panjawin suddenly. Wait. Sina bura pagabit, pagan pagabit you. You go with you. Mosaru, Nikum, Benikauru, Panak pagabit. Iburu, to whip out to kuchit the patuguru. Mosaru, in your which Niam Tawapadi, my pagabit. Wakawasharu. No pagabit. Was a jerum. Chakachum rupakar tigay or no ratpam tigay kum no habitru. Was a jay namuyaga panap or stit na payagam rumai guru. Pinacro mushroom payakuraba hachipagayo. Musaru mai kunapaga musaru tabina bichpuru pagarepa. Has to pass for me to Mosaru, Tavina Vichuru, one can provide Tikapagavim, Kanikapagav, Navakapagavim, Kawasuru, Mosaru, what to go Chachap, Koro, say a patch and channel Kapuga. Mosa was Ruabuga, Mosa Perokapuga, Mosa Wasaru was named Rumapuga. Hey, Hapuga. No, I don't know what could gonna happen. No, what I don't know what gonna happen. Mosaru. No, what do I pack up to my enemy of Wakoro washroom? Yeah, now I keep a guy over to Elpaga. Was to say, I would know what happened room. Say, well, or a Pamano. Punin Paganana, put it into room. No, I'm a tower. Chipaka Katura might put one like any Sadnega. That's not.
Long time ago, when the animals were people, just like we are, there was a group of geese, and this coyote, he come to them, and they were on their way to go south for the winter. So as they were getting prepared to go on their way, then this coyote or Sanab came to him and says, "Hey, how about letting me go along with you and be your leader?" So
And I could stop.
So the geese said that he could come along and go with them, and so while they were on their way, well, they had enemies, and when they'd come to the group of enemies or people, well, then a coyote would start hollering before they even reached their camp or wherever they were, and this would give the geese away. So they didn't think it was right. So as they were going on their way, they stopped at a lake where they could stop off and take a bath and swim a while, dive in, you know how swans do. So they gathered together and they talked amongst themselves about the coyote giving away when they were arriving to where different enemies or groups were, and they told him that he was a giveaway. They didn't think it was fair, so they plotted against him. And so when they did that, well, they plucked all his feathers out and left him featherless. And when they did this, they got up and started on their journey. They flew, and he was left stranded there because he didn't have any feathers. He was hopping around there trying to fly along with them. And so he was left behind, and when they were continued on their way, then he hollered back up to him and says, he says, "Hey," he says, "you can bring me back an expectant mother," says the one that's ready to have a child. And so when they did, well, they must have killed their enemy and brought back the one that was an expectant mother. And when they brought it back to him, he looked around and they presented it to him, and he stood there, and I guess he was just trying to find out where the baby to be was at, and he inspected every little bump there was, wherever there was his nose or whatever bulged out, and because he wanted to find out where the baby was concealed before it was born, and he looked at their knuckles and every little bulge. Well, he looked in everything, and he couldn't find, or he couldn't even locate where the baby was.
Let's talk about that.
Read this. Well, we know in Kwai, you put Yak Pugavich over Akuraway Nikram Nikunyaka. The white buffalo, Kuchup Kaupuga, over Aquaracatu speak per rope so, Nayavane, over Akroin Yakovich, Upuga, to what the balcony, to give Saraika, Aquaroin. Put the whip and bird can each go one each bird can mamak nervakram nene canivetuk. Uvaram rat pitch quick work, no, my mamma te muy guapa, the kavanam, pagayo. Was a rook and your with star up, Nikwak pagakura. Was back in a listener, pao, you put white as a gray over to near the paga. Aquara was one pagapaga, taken a of pagas, bump raro, trascon pagavasap, resty pago. Aquaro in Yupit kuchapaga vato, pinat rasco kaipetgum. In raro, yoga which runamus mata agatikanapaga to covi. You got us at Waisik Namutikanapaga. Wakaro was so you put you kuchakay wakoro. Warusanapaga niwa. You know, Chamata stick figure. Wako Yogovich. Kachin haya sapu kuchapuis the paratena kaway yipuchiruk wasaro akuro yipuchu wayo chipakan kuna pagaron ko on pakay pagani ra ayete kana in kuchapu chipakan was man parani pakay kya paga wakwara chay uyi pucharich kacharam na mi pakay kwani ve moy ke havicho are hepka wat kuchaf pagas mavan kati kare hevichi puchtu marasu matuchi tap ya vakpga was was tokpga yepuch wakwaroin yago was chekariga matatik wachis over was kuchapuch pakpro yan cha matatik pga was arena nagiche wachni yago wat tosestira vipech kuchapu niaga vet kapina pavot kamanai vawat pga ehterevich rupakauchi Vesap gavai paso pga kat waisuk rupeo keten okwa was ovato con rain kuchap kamanai watalai. Okay, turn it off. Wait, what am I gonna use? Once upon a time when all the animals were people, there's this porcupine. He went out and he was hunting and he came upon a herd of buffaloes and he killed one. So he couldn't manage to bring the meat back to where he lived at. So along comes this old coyote. He's stupid. And he asked him to help him to carry the meat back to his place, that when we got there that he'd give him his share of some of the meat that he earned by helping him take the meat back. So the coyote said okay. So instead of that, the porcupine loaded all the meat onto the coyote and told him to carry it for him, that he'd be the scout and lead him. So this is the way it went. And every time he'd get tired, he'd ask the porcupine to let's rest, and he would. And he was getting hungry, his stomach was growling, so he'd try to sneak off a piece of meat, the best part of the meat. And each time he did that, then, he got away with it. So this one time, this porcupine, he just made a deposit of bear traps. and then he come to find out that, and then he stopped after he did that, and the coyote, he did the same thing, and he started sneaking a piece of meat, and then that bear trap, he spoke up and says, he's starting to eat some more again, he's eating it. And then the porcupine caught on, and he beat up the coyote for doing that. And this went on for quite a few days until they reached the destination that was close to the porcupine's place. And the porcupine says, we don't have very far to go from here. I live way over there in that tree. See that tree? I live on the very top there. And he started off, but he came back and he says, I forgot to do something. And he got some more of his bear traps out. And then the coyote, he started eating some more of that meat, and that old bear trap spoke up and says, he's starting to eat some more again. And then the coyote got so mad, he picked up this stick and started clubbing him on the head with it, and says, you old bear trap, you're never going to speak again and never going to talk anymore. He says, and just beat him up and killed him right there. So the coyote ate up all the meat that he could eat, and what was left he hauled it off by himself. So that's the way it is to this day. The bear traps can't talk or move anymore. My name is Gertrude Chapoose, Willie, and I live in West Jordan, Utah. My husband's name is David Willie. My father's name was Connor Chapoose. My mother's name is Lula Wash Chapoose Brock.
Okay, Gertrude, you've been one that's left the reservation and raised a lovely family. Tell me a little bit about how you feel about living off the reservation, and do you think this has been the right thing to do?
Well, I like to say that I hope my kids have accomplished a lot by this. I didn't feel bad about leaving this reservation at first. It was a new experience for me to live among the white people, and I've kept more or less to myself and then going out and just communicating with the white people as much as I could. I know it's two different worlds and that you'd have to be really headstrong in thinking, well, I'm just as good as the next person. And that's been the way we have felt. I live in a wonderful community. All my neighbors are white. But as I come back to the reservation and go back, I know that it's a challenging world in the other world. And as I grow older, then I think, well, I know what my people are going through and their children trying to live with the whites. Because if you're brought up in the old ways, then it's pretty hard to leave these old ideas behind. But as I was young, and I think I was more vulnerable in either way. But as I get older and see my mother aging, and then I think my sisters are all out here, then I think I want to come back and help them in whichever way I can. And I'm trying to teach my kids some of these old Indian things that I have been taught by my grandparents and then my mom and dad. And then we try to live up to what they expect of us. It's kind of hard, but we still do it. Then I keep telling my girls, they're beginning to realize now with all the segregation that's going on, they're either labeled as, as the red man, and they poke fun at them. But then I'm glad that they can say, well, I've got nothing to be ashamed of. I'm an Indian.